Welcome, everybody. We are calling the public hearing meeting to order at 5:01. The reason for this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to ask questions and provide comments before the select board before considering adoption of the bylaw updates. Item 2 is the zoning and floodplain administrator, Kristen Leahy, to present the proposed changes to the town's unified development bylaws. I want to welcome Kristen to present the changes to bylaws.
So I've got a really short presentation. Literally, I cut it in half from when we did the planning one. And then I'll kick it back to you for questions. So if you've got questions, if we could hold them until I finish so that you can direct them to the select board, unless you have something really pressing. This is the 2025 update. I know we're in 2026, but it started in 2024. And this is the final hearing in this process. And it's the time to ask the questions of the select board. And then it will go to the select board for their decision of whether to approve it, return it to the planning commission, or deny it. Can you go to this one? So this is the second page for the select board to follow along with. It's the overview. So this is the overview. We have we've brought Hardwick with these changes. It takes the next step of making us compliant with both the Home Act that Vermont passed and the floodplain regulations that FEMA is going to require when the new maps come through. And there were 4 targeted responses on this one. Create a village center district for East Hardwick, establish a river corridor overlay, remove the outdated Act 250 references, and then improve definitions and internal references. For example, we currently say single-family dwelling, and Vermont Home Act requests that you change the word family to unit, so a single unit dwelling. Next one. The first piece I have here is the East Hardwick Village District. This zoning district was designed specifically for East Hardwick to separate it from the district that is currently in the central downtown Hardwick area, to make it distinct and focus more on what East Hardwick has and is looking at. It's to support a traditional mixed-use village center, encourage housing and small-scale commercial activity, and then looking at aligning the zoning standards with the existing lot sizes and buildings. And this is meant to support the reinvestment in that village. And, it's easier to give the story of East Hardwick Village when they have their own zoning district to align with where the village is. The next one shows where the district was laid out. I know it looks bizarre, but the little cutout over by School Street and Route 16 was in response to the owners of that area were in what is called the highway mixed use area, and they expressed no interest in being changed into a village center district, which the Planning Commission felt was a viable and reasonable request. The next one. So that's it for the East Hardwick. So, that's what I was putting forward for this tonight. Go for it. I'm going to bring that on.
Do you want questions about that now?
Sure. Sure.
Okay. Well, I will start. There's something in the stated objectives for the district. The original stated objective said something about the historic character of the village, and that was left out of this one. And instead it says, as a focal point for development in the community. And it's very unclear to me what that means.
I don't think we changed. I will double. It was the same language that was presented at first. So if something migrated.
Something did migrate, and
okay.
I'm not 100% sure what it was.
Okay.
But
the initial language was the same
different.
language. It was never, the purpose was not changed.
Cheryl, do you mind stating your name for the comment?
I'm sorry, Cheryl Michaels.
Thank
I
you.
live in East Hardwick.
Great. So I think we could probably note that as something to check on.
We will check that.
Thank you for the comment.
So I have the same comments that I had earlier, which is that I feel that a 35-foot height maximum is too small. The houses in East Hardwick are 1.5 or 2 stories high. 34, a full 2-story house with an attic is generally about 30 feet. And we have very few 2-story houses. So this 35 feet, I mean, it's generally less than that. It's generally 22 to 30 feet. We have very few full 2-story houses in East Hardwick. So staying within the nature of the housing that's there, 35 feet bumps it up. So you could get a full 3-story house, and which would mean a full 3-story apartment building or whatever. And the setbacks are only 10 feet. So if you took my lot, for example, suppose my house burned or, got hit by a tornado, or I just felt like turning myself into a developer, I could build a pretty big, let's say, apartment house on that lot. It would go right back practically against the back of the lot. It would have only 10 feet around it, separating it from my neighbors. There would be almost no setback from the street. I think that 25 feet allows maybe 5 feet onto the property now. So you'd have a lot of parking. You could get about probably 12 apartments in that. And I think that would be very out of character with the village. And so I would like to see the height limits be 30 feet, which would allow someone to build a full 2-story house with a peaked roof instead of 35 feet. And I would like to see the setbacks increased on both sides, on all sides.
And that's for you to.
Thank you for the feedback, Cheryl.
Can
Kristen,
I-
you want to continue? We can definitely entertain more questions at the end too.
Okay.
I think if you want to move through the first one, we'll.
That's great, thank you. So the next one was the river corridor overlay. And this shot shows you what a river corridor is. We talk about, we have a lot of terms that have been given out to the public in the last few years. We have river corridor, floodplain, floodway. The river corridor is where the river could meander, theoretically. It's where it wants to go. What was the word when it's being... No, it was another, there was a great word that came from the state, and it really fit this, but it's escaping my brain at the moment. So can we go to the next one? So this is coming up now because the state of Vermont passed Act 181, which is the Flood Safety Act, and it's requiring the state to regulate development within the river corridor overlay throughout the entire state within 3 to 4 years. And so if we adopt river corridor rules now, we are positioned to be able to ask for local control over that permitting process. If we adopt early, we're hoping to give residents time to understand and work with the proposed changes. And it also makes us eligible for a higher level of reimbursement for projects from the state. It's the last piece of how we obtain a higher match from the state. We've done all the other pieces already. The next one. So this again goes back to the river corridor overlay, why it matters. It's the area where the rivers naturally move over time. In Vermont, 75% of our damages occur from erosion and in the river corridors, especially when they're overlaid with the floodplains. So we're hoping to encourage development away from where they could eventually end up in the river. Think of the in by the river is in the river corridor, not in the floodplain, or was. Agriculture, forestry, and routine property maintenance are not affected by these rules. Next one. We recently worked with the river corridor mapping people at Department of Environmental Conservation. They made very limited changes to the downtown section. They acknowledged the bedrock near the pedestrian bridge. They narrowed the map corridor from 3 channel widths to 2 channel widths, and then they did map the entire in by the river site as being river corridor. Which piece?
Can I just pause for 1 second? Gary, if anybody in the audience, could you just raise your hand and state your name so we can call on you? I would greatly appreciate it.
Gary Michaels.
So the width, right, the channel width is like how wide they usually go. There are sections where they'll do say that they think the river can move 3 channel widths, like take the width of the river. It's like a standard measure, yeah. So they went down to 2 in the downtown area.
It seems like it's
Because
going
we have the
wrong way.
walls, etc.
It would seem like that's going in the wrong direction.
It stayed at 3 in the external portions of the town. It's just the downtown where they narrowed it a little bit to respond to the fact that we have granite walls and we've channelized the river quite a bit. And so the next one actually shows, it's hard to see this on here, but it does overlay the 2. So you can see that they moved the river corridor closer to Route 15, where in by the river is, and removed some of the buildings on Maple Street, like the rural edge Maple Street, and Ivan and Brenda Menard's house they sit further up. They don't feel that they will move into that section. So the next piece is that the state has formally indicated to Hardwick that if we continue with this process and adopt river corridor overlays, they will pursue what they call infill mapping, which is when they look at what is in the downtown and create areas where there's no review needed, because the example they gave is if you think of where the Jiffy Mart is, and then there's a space between that and the co-op, Buffalo Mountain Co-op or Market, that has already 2 buildings that are closer to the river there, and that space right there would be considered an area where you could have infill, additional buildings that they wouldn't consider to be impacting on the river corridor ability. So they are willing to come back and put us on the short list to come back and work with us to do the infill mapping, which is a really big benefit.
And Kristen, is that for both? That would be for both downtowns, for East Hardwick or just for downtown?
I'm not clear if it's in East Hardwick. East Hardwick is a slightly different level of tier. It's they talk about the tiers. We're a tier 1A in this section, and there's a tier 1B. Because we were focused on the match of downtown Hardwick, I did not pursue that aspect. Right now, there are not many places in East Hardwick that are impacted by this, but we would find that. I would definitely check into that. Last one. So the Planning Commission held the public hearing, but they also held listening sessions, and they reviewed comments that were received from the public before they forwarded this proposal to the Select Board. They have concluded that the changes support housing near services, safer development patterns in flood-prone areas, reinvestment in East Hardwick, and continued local involvement in river corridor permitting. And their recommendation is that this be accepted by the Select Board. And then the last page is thank you, and the information is all online at the moment.
Great.
Did you find that one?
Well, I want to say thank you to Kristen. So I want to say thank you to Kristen Leahy and the Planning Commission for putting this together. Now is our time for communication questions from the audience and the board as well, if there are any questions. State your name, please, sir.
Thank you. I'm David O'Brien from East Hardwick, Main Street. I had a follow-up relative to your question about what does this do to East Hardwick, and are you saying that isn't developed yet or isn't clear yet? You know our property well. we're already in a floodplain, we
Yeah,
can't
so
do
the
any
floodplain,
development without meeting all the FEMA requirements. So how does the river corridor status change FEMA's requirement?
it doesn't, this is a completely different aspect. And if you are already in the floodplain or floodway, and some of your property is, you're already being held to a much higher standard than the river corridor. The river corridor, the places where the river corridor will impact are those who are not mapped as being in FEMA. It's a different mapping, it's coming from the town, state of Vermont versus the federal level. And that's why they have more flexibility, they can change the maps at will pretty much, as long as they come in and can show you why. Whereas our FEMA maps take us over 10 years to get new ones. It does not require you to have any additional insurance. You don't have to have permits to do interior work in the river corridor, which is different from the floodplain, as you know. You're already at the highest level
Great.
of, yeah,
The feds did it.
yeah. We didn't add anything to you.
Are there any other questions for Kristen?
Yeah, Gary Michaels, still. Is the river corridor defined by some event level, such as a 100-year flood or a 500-year flood? Or
So the 100-year flood and the 500-year flood are FEMA terms, and they relate to floodplain, which is like inundation versus the erosion. So they look more at where, that's when they talk about the channel. You're nodding your head, that's good.
Yeah.
That's why they talk about the channel width.
So what's the parameter that leads to the definition of the river corridor in terms of future security and safety and flood prevention?
Can I have him?
Anyone?
Yes, go for it.
Dave Gross, Hardwick Planning Commission. So, as Kristen pointed out, the FEMA maps, flood insurance maps, are inundation maps, so it's all on elevation. It doesn't really address the danger of erosion. So one way to think about it is if you're right next to the river, but you have a very high bank, you're not in the FEMA flood zone because you're not going to flood. But the river, as we had an example down downtown Village, can scour the bank and drop a house in. So the river corridor addresses the erosive risk also.
That goes beyond the river.
So as opposed to just the straight elevation. So what they're trying to do is look and say, as the river migrates and meanders back and forth across the floodplain, even if you're up on a high sediment knob that is in bedrock, the river could easily undercut your house and drop you in. Whereas you have, until that happens, you have zero risk of being flooded.
Got it, thank you.
Does the select board have any questions? Anybody else? So just to recap the process for folks who might be listening, we're absorbing this information, taking more questions and comments. We appreciate everybody coming today and providing those. Kristen, could you let us know what the rough timing would be for when it would come before the select board? Do you have any idea?
Tonight.
Oh, we're deciding later tonight.
You're deciding
Okay.
later tonight. May I interject for just a moment? To return to Cheryl's question.
Yep.
I have the copy of the December 2nd, 2024 proposed East Hardwick zoning district from the Planning Commission. And it says, to support a central mixed-use area in East Hardwick, the Village Center District is intended to provide a place of civic pride and a focal point for development in the community. The Village Center District enables a variety of housing opportunities with a mix of small-scale commercial and a pedestrian-friendly setting. That has not been changed since then. So it was
Except
there.
the pedestrian-friendly setting and the, I guess that's still there, but small. And
There was nothing about
There was
historic
something
district.
sent out that talked about that the whole reason for doing this was preserving the nature historic nature of the village.
Yeah, but it's not in there because
It's what it was
it's
in
more of
part.
a,
Not very much.
it's.
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so it's still the same as it was
I
when
do
presented.
think a focal point for new development for East Hardwick is a bit overdone. And, and can I make one more little statement, because this is our last opportunity? Basically, East Hardwick is a rural residential village, and growth and density should recognize this while preserving the historic character of the village. It should not be that focal point for new development in the town. Instead, I mean, it could handle easily accessory dwellings, new apartments over garages, you know, things that are in line with the historic nature of the village. You know, backyard houses, anything like that. And I want to make it clear, I'm not challenging the use of the property. I'm not here saying, I don't want somebody to build a great big apartment building and move in a bunch of subsidized housing or something. That is absolutely 100% not what I am saying. I am saying that I want new development, or the zoning board to at least have the tools to look at new development that is out of scale with the village, that would provide another story to a house that is out of scale with what is already there. And I'm just concerned that these bylaws don't give us those tools, and they don't increase setbacks, which it really should increase setbacks because it is rural. And by no longer designating that one area of East Hardwick Village is commercial and another area is rural, is residential, we have, and I think that's fine, but we're hitting a dangerous area where we have tried to combine the two things, and I think done it poorly and not actually been able to keep the residential nature of the village in terms of what could go on in the future. And also, we already have traffic problems. We already have a lot of traffic in the village, and we don't need development that would create more traffic through that village. If you come into East Hardwick, you see kids playing, you see people walking around, and it would be nice to actually preserve that.
Just to explain how the Plan Commission kind of worked out all the different forces acting as we kind of crafted this. One thing on the 35-foot height limit, right now the village primarily is Central Business District, which is all of Main Street, and then School Street and Pleasant Street would be compact residential going out. Both of those previously had a height limit of 35 feet. So we felt that since that had been the pre-existing one, and that is the absolute limit, 36 and a half is a no-go. So we thought we would maintain what had been there previously rather than lowering it. The other side is, the idea was what had been, which developed as residential housing, actually on the old zoning, was Central Business District. So, what we tried to do is by putting it all together. The other advantage, just like to say, this is the first construction, and if anything we find doesn't work and is inappropriate, it can always be amended, and that's one of the reasons we developed East Hardwick's district unto itself, that it wouldn't have a rollover effect onto the Central Business District of Hardwick Village. So bylaws, obviously, as we're doing now, can be amended. The last thing, as far as the development, we are getting regulations from the states on what we can allow and what we can't allow. And like multiple unit dwellings, are mandatory that we allow them. So the idea of somebody coming in and if they so choose and they meet the setback dimensions, that's kind of beyond us.
Well, and just to comment on that as well, that I would imagine, I mean, this doesn't change any of those state and permitting laws, and any development would have to have its own septic system in East Hardwick, which is also limiting in terms of size. So it's, I think it's, I mean, that is one of my questions, which is if there was more development in East Hardwick, could the water district support that, and how that would work?
Oh, you want me to switch a hat to the East Hardwick Fire District? Okay, Dave Gross, I'm on the board of the East Hardwick Fire District, which is a water system. We are in the process of basically going through, we've already had our asset management plan approved by the state. We are 90% approved on our preliminary engineering report, which basically is a study of the whole system and recommendations of improving and upgrading. The greatest limitation right now is when we hit a drought. We did not have to go into conservation, but we were fairly close. On the other hand, we are actively plugging leaks in our 100-year-old system, and we have greatly reduced how much watering we're doing before it gets to the customer. So it's difficult to say in the future that we can't do it, and we do have ongoing plans to improve it, and are actively working on our leak detection and have improvement. So except in the drought, we have excess water. And so that would be the only caveat I would give is the August, we did not have to have mandatory rationing, but it was a constant measure and conversation. However, if we do get new lines in and we get our water usage down to a range that is more what to be expected by national average, we're well above that, then obviously that excess water, even in a drought, would come out. And we also could go in and do additional, perhaps develop another spring or well up on Ward Hill.
Great, thank you.
Kristen? Just to note that when someone takes out a permit or requests a permit for the East Hardwick area, I give them the information about the fire district and have them talk to them ahead of time. I've done 2 or 3 people have asked about accessory dwelling units, and they've all been told to talk to the district to see if they can accommodate them.
And circling back also on Plan Commission discussions, the greatest limit to development of any larger scale residential dwelling or something like that would be the septic. And most of the septic systems, especially along Main Street, are not up to standard. So there has been discussion in the future perhaps developing a communal septic system of some sort, but that would be a prerequisite before any larger scale apartments, let's say, or population would be a limiting factor right now.
Yeah. Great. Are there any other questions? Great. Well, thank you. Cheryl, you have one word?
I just want to remind you that zoning is meant to be proactive. So when Dave says we could, we can come in and change it at any time. Well, when you have an application in front of you that isn't appropriate for the scale of East Hardwick, you can't change your zoning bylaws at that point. So I just want to remind you that it's meant to be proactive and it's meant to be realistic. And to give the town the tools they need to have appropriate development for an area.
Thank you. So is my understanding based on what you said, Kristen, is that it's, or what you said as well, David, is that the height actually isn't changing. It's just changing in that we've reframed East Hardwick as its own district, so the.
Combined with
So
a big,
It's 35 in each district,
The
right?
height was previously set because of the height of the buildings in Hardwick Village, because the part of East Hardwick that was central business district, that was the business district, was using the zoning bylaws of Hardwick Village.
Right, and when we discussed the heights at the planning commission meetings, we talked about that, and we talked about that in this new overlay, in this new district, I mean, we wanted to make things easy for people, so it's the same height as every other district in the town, as every other residential involved district. So it's, that's what I had the computer out for a moment earlier. I was looking through the bylaws to see if that was, my memory was correct, and it's the compact residential is that, the
Rural residential.
rural, I'm sorry, rural, yeah.
They both are.
Oh, they both are, right, I just
Yeah.
don't have all the names.
It
in my
is
head.
across the board.
And
Across
that
the board,
coincides
it's
with our
the same.
fire apparatuses.
Correct.
Really nice.
Actually, one of the changes that the state would recommend for the central business is that it go to
Another story. Right.
which if we don't adopt this, we continue to have central business in your district, and which means we go to 40 feet.
So we get 4 level apartment buildings in East Hardwick.
We don't.
Yeah, I'm not saying don't adopt it, I'm just saying bring it down to 30 feet, which is in line, actually higher than most of the buildings in East Hardwick.
Yeah.
In fact, all of them, I think.
Okay. All right, so, hearing no other communication or questions from the audience, we're going to go ahead and adjourn the public hearing at 5:33.